G'day, legends. I hope that you're having a fantastic day and a fantastic Friday leading into the weekend. I hope that you're feeling a little bit better than me. Since I did my elbow, I've had my first large deadlifting session back yesterday afternoon, and my God, I am very sore, especially getting on and off the toilet. But we do have a lot to talk about today. Of course, we're going to look at the massive missile and drone strikes into Ukraine yesterday. Of course, we're going to have a look at the maps that'll be in the second half. We need to talk more about conscription as it has gone through. The bill has been passed. We need to look at this upcoming peace summit in Switzerland. And we also need to look at new evidence that's coming out from officials saying that the Russian forces not only has been rebuilt, but potentially more powerful from when they began the war in February 2022. So that is all of what you have to look forward to in today's update. And I've worn a tie just especially for you. So we need to talk that overnight Ukraine was hit with another large barrage of missiles and drones, which has absolutely devastated Ukraine's electricity network. And the Ukrainian Air Force has claimed they've shot down 57 of the 82 targets, being around 69%. Now, you know what I think about numbers in this, but what this is showing us more and more is whether the numbers are true or not it doesn't matter. That typically this number reported by Ukraine is upwards of 90%, typically around that 100% mark. But with it dropping more and more, we can confirm that Ukraine's air defense is running very low, if not out on some of types of interceptors, with even their reporting being hits, less and less hits of these intercepting SPAG, missiles, whatever, into targets. So let's have a look over this, as there is some interesting stuff, some new weapons being used here as well. So this is what is widely being reported. The Ukrainian Air Defense's forces shot down 57 of the 82 targets, 16 of these KH-101s, 0 of the Kinzhal ballistic missiles, 0 of the S-300, 39 of the 40 Shahed, and 2 of 4 of these KH-59s. So there's some numbers here which are not being reported and some that are. So we're going to talk more about the KH-69, the X-60, KH-59, KH-69, X-69 in that, and what these targets are and where there's some difference in reporting on these. But we'll talk about S-300 and whatever in a second. But what has been hit is this Trapalia power station in Kyiv, well, just out of Kyiv, and this is it. Here we will confirm, just to give you an idea. You can just see, oh, I'm on the wrong side. Sorry, I'm doing spins. I need to just move down the road a little bit. Oh shit, where am I now? Here we go. You can see this is the station here. This lines up with the photographs we have of where it is, and then of course this being completely destroyed here. And we do have as well from the owner of this power plant as well. Let's have a look at this one first. But that they are reporting this Center Energo later announced that the attack against this plant led to the destruction of 100% of the company's generation capacity. Now, this is what they released on their official networks. It's good that our people who are on shift during the shooting are alive. This was the largest supplier of electricity in Kiev, Cherkasy, and Zhytomyr region. The scale of destruction is terrifying, and they've lost 100% of their generation here. So we'll zoom out and just show you exactly where this is sitting. So this is where it is, and of course this is Kyiv up here, so supplying a hell of a lot of electricity in and around the regions here. So this is a very, very major strike on the infrastructure network happening there. And we do have a few more photographs to show you. We have some videos as well. So we do have definitely this here. This is some of the first footage that came out, that this has been completely devastated by missiles, as well as in this we had that one Shahed got through. We do have 100% evidence that at least one got through. We see a Shahed here over Kiev, and a strike successful here. Amazing video, he says. And people are saying, if you listen to it, this is the newer version of the jet-powered Shahed, not the lawnmower-sounding prop one. Hard to hear over just the amount of fire trying to take that down, but it does seem to line up. Now, that power station, what exactly hit it? Why their targets? Well, we know that Putin has, of course, launched many strikes against critical infrastructure in Ukraine. Ukraine recently has been launching strikes against critical infrastructure in Russia. Now, people will jump up and down and say these are war crimes. No, they're not. These targets are dual use. Belligerents can target these. These can be targeted. Electricity is used both for civilian and military purposes. Now, I'm not saying that therefore this is humane. I'm just saying by the letter of the law, that's what it actually says. And let's look at what Zelensky and Putin has said. We'll go Putin first. So, unfortunately, we observed a series of strikes on our energy sites recently, and we're obliged to respond. The strikes on energy are linked in part with solving one of the tasks that we set ourselves, and that is demilitarization. We believe, above all, that in this way, we will affect Ukraine's military-industrial complex in a very direct way. And it will. Of course, this will have an effect on the military, the civilians, morale, all this and this, all is sort of a butterfly effect in this, but it definitely does. And that's exactly what Ukraine was looking for, striking equivalent targets in Russia, was that it will affect economic, military complex. It's all one system. It's all almost organically together in governments. That he also said, said that they would refrain from carrying out such attacks in winter out of humanitarian considerations. Now, I don't know if this is true or not, but we did see at the end of 22 into 23, that winter, we saw many Russian strikes putting millions in the cold. And then 23, 24, we didn't see the same amount of winter strikes from Russia. Many put this down to they didn't have the capability to do it, especially with Ukraine's new air defense. But this is what then he is saying here. What I mean is that we didn't want to leave social institutions without power, hospitals and the like. But he said the Ukrainian strikes, many on oil refineries in some different Russian regions in recent weeks, prompted Moscow to respond. In his comments to Lukashenko, of course, the leader of Belarus, Putin again dismissed any suggestion that Ukraine's allies, that Russia had planned to attack any European countries beyond Ukraine. We'll talk about this later. This is what we hear more and more and more, is if Russia's not stopped in Ukraine, that then they will be attacking Western partners. Russia has vehemently said no, but we're seeing more and more officials in the US, military officials in NATO, the US, whatever, saying this more, as well as military members too, saying that this is nonsense. It is necessary for the ruling circles, as we used to say, to explain and justify their expenditure on the war in Ukraine. Now, it's not that there's no chance of this happening, but we do believe this is being used as an informational ploy from people like, say, Biden, who, originally the Russian military is strategically defeated, blah, 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 along those lines. Now that saying, well, it could be Russian fighters fighting American fighters, and there's been this big swing, and I think what it is, and a lot of people are pointing at this, is there's a informational swing to then send more money into Ukraine, trying to get people, to the civilians in their countries, in America or Belgium or France or wherever, saying that if we don't stop it over there, they're going to be here. So we need your support to send more money. I'm on that side, that is more what it is. I don't believe there's much of a risk of Russia trying on NATO. It's just not going to end well. Well, nuclear power is not going to end well for anyone, but it'll take out nuclear weapons. It's not going to go well for Russia either, against the power of NATO and those countries involved. Maybe I could be wrong. Let me know. I'm happy to be incorrect on anything. Putin, again, rejected the notion of holding peace talks without Russia's participation. Switzerland has said it will host a world summit for peace. We're going to talk about that later on, but I thought I'd just mention it here, a little bit of foreshadowing. Now, this is what Zelensky has said, that Russia fired more than 40 missiles and about 40 drones at Ukraine. Some missiles and Shahed drones were successfully shot down. Unfortunately, only part of them. Russian terrorists once again have targeted critical infrastructure. Another heinous missile attack on Kharkiv, and also targeted objects in Kiev, Zap, Lviv, Odessa region. So there's a lot of strikes everywhere, and we can see in areas like Odessa, there is a huge increase in Russia's ability of ISR down there as well, and Kharkiv with a lot of those shorter range modified S-300 systems. He also says we need air defense systems and other defense assistance, not just turning a blind eye and having lengthy discussions. every Ukrainian official is reaching out going, we desperately need air defense, and there hasn't been much real movement on that. Some will talk about the votes in the EU. The EU is not a military complex, so to speak, like NATO or like the US or countries within this for those Patriot systems going in. And we'll speak a bit more about Patriots and the effects on some of this as well. But what hit that electric power station? So we talk a lot about Russian Kh-59 missiles. Well, last night it's actually being reported that what hit the power plant were the newer iteration, like the Mark II of these, being the Kh-69 missiles. Now, what these are is, well, I should say, any weapon system like this, whether it's Western, it's Russian, it's Chinese, it's North Korean, the amount of actual data on this that is publicly available, people draw up numbers and everything, but all of this is going to be very closely held. The actual capabilities, the capabilities may be overhyped, may be underhyped, but with any weapon systems, numbers, whatever, it's all kept very close to chest. Take things with a grain of salt. But what these effectively are, these are a subsonic cruise missile that can fly much lower than other iterations, say even like your Kinzhals, and are said to be much harder to then actually intercept. So let's have a look at this. Now, this is from RBC Ukraine. Russia strikes the thermal power plant, the latest X-69 or Kh-59, 69, sorry, depending if they use an X or a KH. But this is evidenced by found debris. According to received information, the range of the launch of the missiles is about 400 kilometers. This parameter exceeds the known range estimates of the X-69 at 300. So everyone was saying before this, the known range was 300, and these are now said that they did launch them now from 400 kilometers away, adding another ton on top of that for the range. Now, here we have what is known about the missile. Available data, range of 290 kilometers, but in practice, it's turned out to be more like 400. That similar to the X-101, which we looked at some of those down and hits too. Satellite navigation with jam-resistant antennas, but the ability to fly at very low altitude of 20 meters. So about 60 feet for you freedom-loving, hamburger-eating, gun-toting Americans out there. I don't know. If you see meters, just times it by 3. It's close enough. But the results of these strikes indicate capability to penetrate the obviously depleted Ukrainian air defense systems. Secondly, launching the missile from aircraft negates the characteristic feature of large-scale attack missions where they have to go from these strategic bombers. And we know when the bombers are airborne, so there is more time and warning given, where these can go in smaller aircraft, therefore won't have the amount. Now, launching from Su-34 to Su-35, massive characteristic due to the greater number of carriers, so more planes can actually carry them. But something we are missing in these is these apparently were specifically made for the Russian stealth Gen 4 plus Gen 5 Su-57, which we're yet to actually see evidence of on the battlefield. Speaking on that range of 400 Ks, therefore it can fire much further back. The longer range on anything means that you'll be well behind where either the front line is or back within your own borders as well. And we've spoken about this is the main reason why something like an F-16 is not going to be a game changer for systems like this. It's going to be very hard to intercept anything at 20 meters anyway, but if these can fire from back in Russian territory and those aircraft can't strike within Russian territory, well, it's going to be more of a problem. You're definitely not going to be able to hit the carrier, and hitting the missile itself is much more difficult. But speaking of the Su-57, it should become the main cruise missile for it. So this is the Kh-69 and or X-69, same, sitting inside the belly of these stealth fighter aircraft that we're yet to see actually working, at least 100% evidence of it. But that is interesting to see that all happening as well. Now, with that missile, we have no information on what stockpiles Russia may have or what their actual productivity of this system is, like how many are they actually making. But this does disprove again the idea that Russia is failing to produce and develop high-tech missiles. So just a quick one on those S-300s. We hear a lot about Ukraine trying to get Patriot systems in, but there is also a need for other air defense complexes, batteries as well, because it does not make economic sense or strategic sense to hit something like these modified S-300s, which, what we saw last night, 100% got through in areas with Patriot interceptors. It just doesn't make sense to do that. Russia has far too numerous numbers of these, and it is showing that these modified S-300s are proving to be very difficult for Ukraine to intercept. So there's going to have to be not only the Patriots, but more air defense put in Ukraine as well. And this, of course, leads into our next bit, that the Russian forces are now larger than before the war. Although we've been told again and again that it would take decades for the Russian military to, come back, and it had been strategically destroyed. They're out of missiles. They can't make anything. So let's look at what has come out yesterday. That this bloke here, Army General Christopher Cavoli, top US commander in Europe and NATO, is warning Congress that Russia has replaced its heavy battlefield losses. That he heads up the European Command, is also NATO's supreme allied commander on the continent, saying the overall message I would give to you is the Russian military has grown back to what they were before. They've got some gaps that they have been produced by this war, but overall their capacity is very significant still, and they intend to make it go higher. Continuing in this statement, that Russia has even more manpower than when it launched its full-scale invasion, of course, in 22, saying Russia is reconstituting that force far faster than our initial estimates suggested. The army is actually now larger by 15% than it was when it invaded Ukraine. The four-star general told senators that Russia had also replenished its heavy tank losses on the battlefield and now operates as many tanks in Ukraine as it did during the beginning of the full conflict. Now, of course, what matters here is just the amount of numbers, but it also matters what variants these are too. But we know Russia has had heavy tank losses, but we also know either from Soviet times or Russian times, they can produce a hell of a lot of just equipment. Now, he also warned that Ukraine is still almost entirely dependent on outside support, and this can be a problem because that can be cut off or go through peaks and troughs, saying the severity of this moment cannot be overstated. If we do not continue to support Ukraine, Ukraine could lose. If Ukraine fails in this fight, I think problems radiate outwards, beginning with Europe. So there will be the possibility, the probability, that Russia will continue aggressive behavior. They will certainly be emboldened. They're certainly building a military that's going to be capable of it. He also talks about these shells here as 5-1 for rations at the moment, but that disparity would double to 10-1 in a matter of weeks. Talking about whoever can shoot the most will win. Now, we had this from, I believe, the 4th of April, yes, from another top US official saying, I think we've assessed throughout the last couple of months that Russia has almost completely reconstituted militarily. But not just Ukraine, its newfound capabilities pose a longer-term challenge to stability in Europe and threaten NATO allies. Now, one thing I will say in this, whether you're a private soldier, a general, or an official in the government, you're all part of this government complex, and therefore you're part of information campaigns. And messages like this could be part of the overall campaign to push that Russia has goals beyond Ukraine and that they're building up massively militarily and having a fear factor that they could achieve this, and that therefore more aid should be sent to Ukraine. And of course, that is the current administration's goals. I'm not saying this is false. I'm just showing what the informational space can say and push around on messages like this. But we do know that Russia is having more success on the front line, is showing that they are fighting better and having a lot more success with their missiles going in as well. Now, let's talk about conscription. And we've talked a hell of a lot about this and mobilization over the past, say, week. And today, with overwhelming support, the bill has gone through. Now, let's have a look at this bill. So 283 were in support and 49 chose to abstain to, of course, adopt those new mobilization laws. But this bill, this does not include anything to demobilize people off the front line after 18 months on the front, or 3 years in total, or rotation of troops. Now, we've been told that these will come in separate bills, and of course, these came at the request of the Commander-in-Chief, Syrskyi. So there's no lie at all that Ukraine has a severe shortage of manpower. Now, History Legend's most recent video has done a good in-depth breakdown of this, and you should go have a look at that. Now, the issue is not just having people. Ukraine has plenty of people, but the issue is having people that can fight, that want to fight, to go on the front line. And where Ukraine has to have so many people that are not in fighting positions or directly contributing that effort, of course, you have to have thousands of men just on checkpoints all around the country, and men working in critical industries as well. So let's talk about conscription. I believe if Ukraine is to fight on and survive, it must do this. What it must do is it must get people back into Ukraine, whether from Europe, Australia, the US, men and women. Now, we know millions have left, and I believe Ukraine needs to bring people back in to backfill those that they want to send to the front. So say at this electricity plant where the majority of people working there will be men that fit within that 18 to 60 range. They can't go anywhere because they're working the critical infrastructure or men on checkpoints. If this could be filled by people coming back in, whether there is a medical exemption and they've moved to Switzerland, or that they're male or female, that is the solution to free up manpower. But History Legends makes a good point of saying those patriotic guys that wanted to sign up, they have signed up. What's left is conscripts. I'm not saying there's no one signing up, but you're going to have to mobilize more people. Now, actually doing this, of bringing people back in, this may be impossible. Of course, Europe and other countries, they offer protections for, actually bringing people back, and opportunities, both social and economic, that are massive. Of course, even just getting paid by these countries can be more than working full-time in Ukraine. I know friends of mine who are doing that. Now, also, it's been over 2 years, and a lot of people who've moved out of Ukraine have made new homes, new relationships, new careers, and Ukrainian polls have shown that over 70% of people don't actually plan on returning. What's going to make this very, very hard. But I think there needs to be an influx back to free up more people to go to the front if that's what Ukraine wants to choose to do on those mobilizations. Now, speaking of conscription, personally, as a soldier who I once volunteered, I question the effectiveness of conscripted soldiers. There is nothing worse in the field than someone who doesn't want to be there. And I've only ever actually worked with volunteers in relative peace. So let's talk about some conscripts before and what we have seen. We spoke 2 videos ago about maybe a limited plebiscite or referendum on voting, that the same people that are going to be conscripted, 18 to 60, is there some way it's democratic of get them to have a plebiscite being like, what do we think about further than conscription? And this has been done before, actually then by Australia in World War I. That, unlike other countries engaged in World War I, conscription was not introduced in Australia. All the Australians who fought World War I were volunteers. While many politicians favoured conscription, of course they did, it was strongly opposed by many in the community. Being anti-conscription was not the same thing as being anti-war. That's something people need to take into account. Themselves, volunteers were anti-conscription, and because they did not want to fight alongside men who did not want to be there. They considered it could affect their morale and ability to fight cohesively. This is very interesting about here. What people on the front, who people are fighting, think of volunteers as well. Now, we need to look at these referendums. So, I can't find why this was a referendum, not a plebiscite. I don't really get it. But the first one was in 1916, saying, are you in favour of government having, in this grave emergency, the same compulsory powers of citizens in regard to requiring their military service for the term of this war outside the Commonwealth, as it now has regard in military service within the Commonwealth? Now, over 1 million were in favour, but just higher were against. Now, the next year, the question asked, are you in favour of a proposal by the Commonwealth government for reinforcing the Commonwealth forces overseas? And what you can see here is even less are in favour and then more are against. But still pretty close. But we did speak about this, that overall the vote is not going to be the guys who are actually getting sent. And one thing we do know is that there is no, you can't vote for the president in Ukraine. The election's been, we don't know when because of martial law. And the actual saying this and demobilisation isn't there. And people are saying, well, when would we be demobilised? When can we have a say in what is happening? Now, this was interesting. This was from the Brits in World War I as well, arguing many working men would strongly resist serving in a nation of which they did not have a legitimate share in governing. We see this with what is being said by Ukrainian guys online about looking at conscription. 40% of men over 21 were denied the vote by the franchise and registration laws. To them, conscription was yet another theft of working men's rights by rich capitalists. The only counter-argument the government could offer, it was of absolute necessity. Workers must be convinced that there were too few volunteers that meet the need. We know Ukraine has a volunteer trough at the moment, therefore is going to need more. But we know that it's been hundreds of thousands, if not some people say near 1 million, Ukrainian men move out of the country, including the children of some leaders as well. And a lot of this comes down to money and opportunity that other people won't have. Now, let's talk then about the peace summit that is upcoming in Switzerland. Now, we get more and more of this every day, but the Swiss president has said we're not going to sign the peace deal at this conference, that it's just a first step. It has to be clear from the start that Russia sooner or later has to be there. And we've spoken about this. If Russia's not there, if Russia's not involved in this, the only option is to push through and clear down through Crimea, down through to 1991 borders. If you want a peace summit and any negotiation, you can't not have Russia there. And the foreign minister has said, now it's not mandatory that it's there the first day. We could also imagine that on the first day, people might agree about how to better invite Russia. Now, Russia was invited to this. Ukraine didn't want Russia there. But if you're having a peace summit and both countries involved aren't there, well, it's more along the lines of what people said is, no, this is a way just to drum up more support for Ukraine. Vladimir Zelensky said in Turkey that Ukraine does not see a place for Russia during the peace summit. Turkey is also asked to be, or offered to be, a mediator in things like this as well. We looked at this yesterday from Swiss media saying Russia is unlikely to participate. Moscow says it's pointless and doomed to fail if it does not take Russia's interests into account, that it is trying to rally support for Ukraine, and that it's around Zelensky's peace formula that it says with the new realities on the ground doesn't then reflect it. And the reality on the ground of manpower shortages, shell shortages, air defense shortages, and Russia inching forwards, that is the reality on the ground. That doesn't quite meet the peace formula of why would Russia agree to hand everything back and move out either. So I don't have high hopes for that peace conference coming forward, other than people getting a nice comfy bed in the old 5-star hotel. Now, let's have a look at the maps. Of course, we have Ukraine, the capital of Kyiv. The red areas occupied since 22 and the purple since 2014. Now, there's no NOAA reports maps today. There's only one Surak report map. We didn't have a deep state map update yesterday, so this one has now updated for 2 days worth. Now, let's actually just come down into this Orikhiv Zap front near Robotny. Now, there has been a lot of talk about this, and let's just have a look at where this has moved. So we see an increase in grey zone out north of Novopokrovka into the first areas of Robotny, that this is grey zone and that it has limited again just today. And we do have varying reports saying that Russia is present here, Russia have areas here, but we're not 100% sure. But that the Southern Command of Ukraine has really pushed back on what was said. The statement of the deputy of the Zaporizhia and regional councils that the Russians entered the village of Robotny as a result of the assault and actually established themselves there are not true. Some mass media and Telegram channels picked up this information without verifying its authenticity. That he says the occupiers have no success in these directions, and this is in pursuit of an artificial sensation. Such statements by incompetent persons can significantly harm the combat operation and consequently people's lives. So this was pushing back on what the regional council had said from the Southern Command. But the map is showing that there's at least grey zone in there, so we're not sure what the actual front looks like in there. Now, up through this Urazani front, we don't see any change. Where we'll come through next is Novomylivka. Of course, other maps are showing significantly more control in here than this, but we can see this has caught up a little bit from the 10th to the 11th. Of course, we didn't have this map update yesterday, that there is a control moreover, say 60% on this map. Some are showing far more as well. I don't have a map update there. Nothing around Madayinka, but let's have a look at Krasnohorivka, as we can see an increase in the grey zone as well just down here. We know Russia had a failure to push from the south, pushing north in here, and have changed where they're trying to push and come down the railway here. Better cover and concealment, but it's also more heavily defended by Ukraine. That it is said to be Russia in these first areas here. This map is not reflecting any of that. Now, of course, come up into Avdiivka, where we had heard about movements out towards Karamik and near Berdachi, as well as closing up this gap between Ulmansk and Pervomayski. Let's go back. So we do see a slight movement just out to the south here. Of course, far less than other maps are showing, but we can see Russian movement there, as well as a push out from Stepovy and Berdachi, of course, increasing that buffer then around Avdiivka. So we do have an update just out towards here in Karamik by Suryak Maps here. Of course, this is the same front here, showing that there is a further push up through. We can see where this road runs through here, saying that it's more up into this area, but yet we don't have any confirmation on how exactly that is looking. Now we'll come into the next front that is incredibly hot around Bakhmut. We see just an increase in then the grey zone out from Kromove, but no massive movements in here. We do have, I believe, yes we do, a War Mapper update here. Now this is over a couple of days, but showing movements out from Ivanovsky as well up into these first areas then of Chasiv Yar sitting here as well. And of course movement out from Boronivka, showing far more control than this map is showing here, I believe. Now, one thing I will say is War Mapper is very conservative towards gains. Now, we just need to move up just a little bit north of here, and we'll then look at this Spurny Vimimka front here. Now, there is no real movement. We see just a slight bit of grey zone movement. We do have War Mapper updating this too. So we see the train line just here, Berestov out from the train line, saying that Russia has increased more control, confirming that grey zone movement and what Suryak has said here. But otherwise, movements on these maps, there's not much else. But where we need to have a look is up in the Kharkiv Oblast up here. Of course, this green zone is where Russia once was, and we hear more and more that there is a huge threat of Russia launching a further assault out from here. We've heard from helicopters, heard from armor, we've heard there's tens of thousands of troops here. None of that is really confirmed. Like, it seems to be very speculative, but we have seen evacuations around Kupiansk before, and today we have more of evacuations than around Kharkiv. We know Kharkiv has been getting hit with glide bombs, with S-300s, with everything. So the head of the Kharkiv Regional State Administration has said the Regional Defense Council recently decided to force the evacuation of families and children in 47 frontline settlements. We're talking about settlements close to the border with the Russian Federation of Kharkiv in these districts. According to our information, 182 children live in these designated settlements. This does not apply to the city of Kharkiv. Evacuation routes have already been determined, and places for people's temporary accommodation have been reserved. So, on the border with the Russian Federation, out, of course, around this border here. And there's been much speculation that could there be a push and an attempt again on Kharkiv. Legends, I hope that you are having a fantastic day. We have covered everything I wanted to speak about. Look after yourselves. Have a fantastic day. Have a fantastic weekend. And I'll speak to you hopefully tomorrow. Thank you. Bye-bye.